My name is Diego Ruiz, and this is my teacher topic, eugenics, specifically in Buck versus Bell. In 1939 through 1945, the world was having a second great war, and a new word would be created from the aftermath: genocide. The deliberate killing of a large group of people, especially those of a particular ethnic group or nation. The war is well known as the Holocaust, meaning destruction on a mass scale, because of the mass genocide of not only the Jews but anyone who did not fit Hitler's ideal image of the master race was endangered. In the end, nearly 60 million lives would be lost to the war. But what was this idea of the master race? Did Hitler dream it overnight, or did he pull ideas from other places around the world? In 1859, the book Origin of the Species was published by Charles Darwin. By the early 1900s of America's history, the idea of Darwinism was a spark of many controversial conversations. Darwinism was the idea that the fittest would survive. Though Darwin's research was only intended to prove that species have indeed evolved over time, many theories and ideas formed, such as social Darwinism and the debunking of the creation theory. One theory that evolved itself into thought was the idea of eugenics, which the term itself actually coined by a cousin of Charles Darwin, Francis Galton. Buck versus Bell wasn't simple the Supreme Court case that in the United States legalized the forced sterilization of imbeciles, or the mentally disabled. Carrie Buck was a young girl who had become pregnant without a spouse, as her mother had been with her, and therefore was seen as immoral and feeble-minded. Carrie was institutionalized in the Virginia colony for epileptics and feeble-minded, at the unfortunate timing of Dr. Albert Priddy, who was a superintendent of the institution for the feeble-minded, was looking for a test case on a legal breaking ground towards sterilization. However, Dr. Priddy became ill and met his death early on in the case. Strode, the state lawyer and eugenics activist, then wrote to Dr. John Bell. Bell was to overtake the case and also be the new superintendent. Bell's view was slightly different. While Priddy believed eugenics could help the advancement of humanity, Bell believed the eugenic sterilization was necessary to save humanity from the abyss. From the beginning, it was clear that Carrie Buck did not have a fair chance in court. In fact, her lawyer, who was given the role as her guardian and defender in the courtroom, committed to the opposite actions he was responsible for. Irving Whitehead, Carrie Buck's lawyer, would collaborate with the prosecution to help make a stronger case against Carrie. The only argument that Whitehead seemed to make was one of 3 points. The sterilization ordered against Carrie violated the Due Process Clause, the Equal Protection Clause, and the imposed against cruel and unusual punishment. Adam Cohen suggests here that the only reason Whitehead made these legit arguments was for the purpose of affirming the constitutionality of Virginia's eugenic sterilization law. Basically, it was in the prosecution's best interest that these 3 points that Irving asked be stricken down after being asked. After the Supreme Court case of Buck versus Bell had ended, Oliver Wendell Holmes, who was at the time the Supreme Court Justice, made a bold statement that still echoes in history. To conclude the case, Holmes stated, "1 generation of imbeciles is enough," referring to Carrie Buck and her mother, who had both had a child out of wedlock. The ruling of the Supreme Court case meant worst case scenario had arrived. It meant the American people would now see forced sterilizations as a conservative and responsible matter. As Cohen states, Buck versus Bell breathed life into the eugenic sterilization movement. In the years that followed, many fell into being victimized by this cruel and inhumane practice. Soon other countries followed in the eugenics movement with their own legalizations of the matter. Denmark enacted voluntary sterilization in 1929 and forced sterilizations in 1934. Sweden and Norway in 1934, Finland in 1935, Estonia in 1936, Iceland in 1938. It's fair to say that the ruling of Buck versus Bell, in a sense, opened Pandora's box, not to the idea of eugenics, but scientific racism. In fact, it was the year 1933 that Nazi Germany produced a law for the prevention of hereditary diseased offspring. It seemed the Germans embraced the idea of eugenic sterilization. Hitler is quoted as saying, "I have studied with great interest the laws of several American states concerning the prevention of reproduction by people whose progeny would in probability be of no value or be injurious to the racial stock." Finally, at the Nuremberg trials, Nazis who were charged with mass sterilization defended themselves by quoting the case of Buck versus Bell. These series of events have left a sour taste for the word eugenics and is a reason many are terrified that the practice should ever arise again. One of my favorite quotes I have come across in this research, this small research, is a simple one, but I believe holds great truth. Sciences teach us how to clone a T-Rex. Humanities teach us it's not a good idea. Thank you.